my very dear friend Kevin Hassett, who is the brand new director of the National Economic Council. Kevin, the first thing I want to tell you is congratulations. Congratulations.
Thanks. And it's an honor to be back in your office, Larry.
That's right. Yes, indeed. A lot of distinguished people have had that job down through the years. All right, Kevin, let me ask what a lot of people are asking. How do you see right now, you're going to be a very key player, you already are, how do you see President Trump's tariff strategy? It's all over the front pages today. What do you think?
Right. Right. Well, I think that you saw from the Colombia negotiation that the president is going to use tariffs if he needs to in order to get people to make policy concessions that are good for America, that put America first. But the thing that you need to understand when you're looking at the president's actions is that whatever tariff comes from somebody who does something like stops us from sending planes to Colombia to get rid of the criminals that they sent here in the first place, that if we were to put a tariff on a country like that, whatever tariff that might be is going to be in addition to whatever President Trump does in the future when he's thinking about an overall tariff. And the bottom line is that a tariff isn't necessarily just a weapon, but economically, if you do the math, a tariff can be part of a supply-side strategy that includes a big tax bill as well. And whether tariffs go through reconciliation or not is something the president and everybody will negotiate, but you could have a really great supply-side reform to American taxes by putting tariffs, combining tariffs with a smart reform to the tax system.
Well, you know, I like the numbers, at least the ballpark numbers, roughly $5 trillion of imports on a yearly basis. So if you had a 10% universal tariff, I'm just hypothesizing, but if you had 10%, depending on the sensitivities and elasticities of demand and so forth, you could produce $500 billion worth of revenues, which could then go to finance tax cuts. I kind of like that approach. It has just enough William McKinley in it to make it sexy, I think. President is a big follower of William McKinley. He's right when he says from 1870 to 1913, we didn't have an income tax. The Civil War income tax was taken off, and we used tariff revenues to finance the government. He's right about that. So this has just a slight William McKinley feel. I don't think you knew William McKinley, actually.
No, you went to college with him, I think, if I recall.
Well, I was a young research assistant for Teddy Roosevelt later on. But in all seriousness, though, I'm sure the revenue implications with respect to tax cuts has something to do with Mr. Trump's thinking.
Yeah, for sure. And the bottom line, again, is that when the people who are trying to cause panic over President Trump's trade policy simulate what it's going to do, they don't account for all the other policies. So President Trump is drill, baby, drill, and deregulate, and tax cuts, and reduce spending. Forget about like the fact if you're going to say the economy would be better if we don't do anything, say the Democrats, that they're spending $1.5 trillion a year more than when we left office. So we got all these things to fix. And if you look at tariffs as part of an overall strategy, you're going to see, as President Trump says, a golden age, and it's going to be the biggest supply-side reform that America's ever seen.
So Wall Street is somewhat crazed about tariffs. And you read routinely, every news story has a paragraph or two about how tariffs are going to be inflationary. Is Wall Street wrong, Kevin Hassett?
Look, that's everybody's been saying that for the last year, and then there was like this Goldman Sachs thing that said that that Harris's policies would be better than Trump's. So let's look at it this way: if you spend $1.5 trillion a year more on government spending, you're going to get inflation. If you don't let people drill, baby, drill, then energy prices are going to go up, and so you're going to get inflation. If you do, as Biden did over the last couple of years, kill 130 million chickens, then egg prices are going to go up. So the fact is that we're doing micro things correctly, deregulatory things correctly, and we're going to get the macro stuff right, too. But make no mistake that inflation under Joe Biden was just under 5% for his whole term, about a little bit less than it was under Jimmy Carter, and way more than double what it was under President Trump. And we're 100% on the ball going after inflation, but it's going to require an all-of-the-above approach. And right now, we've inherited really high inflation. It's still 50% higher than it was when we left office. So President Trump for sure is going to go after this stuff, and we're going to do it with all of the above. And so the idea that tariffs are going to be inflationary without looking at everything else, well, it's also inflationary for the price of eggs if you kill 130 million chickens, guys. Come on.
Okay. There was a Wall Street Journal story this morning, you probably saw it, that said Trump advisors, quote unquote, it didn't name them directly, it was sort of anonymous advisors, say that he is close to deciding on a 25% hike in the tariffs for Mexico and Canada, which would throw a monkey wrench into USMCA. Are you able to comment on that news story?
President Trump is 100% committed to getting the fentanyl imports into the U.S. under control. It's poured across the border of Canada, border of Mexico, and he's very serious about it. And that's all I can say right now.
All right. I get it. Tax strategy. Will I get my one big beautiful bill, or how's this going to work?
You know, this is one of the great things about President Trump's leadership is he's down there negotiating with Congress right now, and I know what he wants. He wants one big, beautiful bill, and he wants that, and that pretty much is usually what happens. You and I go back when we were there in the previous Trump administration, that pretty much every time he said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, then you pretty much get what he wants. I can remember the one difference I remember is he wanted 15% corporate rate, and then we got 20 in the end. So he can compromise if he has to, but most of the time he gets what he wants.
Well, he might get his 15, huh? I mean, that could very well be in the package.
Putting that number out there that I wouldn't be surprised. He's had 15 in the brain for a long time.
I know. I wouldn't be surprised either. What about the idea, Senator Crapo's idea, not just his idea, but others, to use a current policy baseline? That is, the tax cuts are popular and should be made permanent. They're neither deficit high or deficit low. That, as Obama used it back in 2012, the current policy baseline says nothing has changed, and therefore they shouldn't have to be rescored all over again. Is that socializing around the White House? Is the president aware of that? I think Senator Crapo has talked to President Trump about it.
Sure. Yeah, President Trump is 100% aware of baseline strategy, and he respects that people in Congress have to decide how they want to negotiate baselines amongst themselves. What President Trump cares about is what's the truth. What are the numbers? You know, how is this going to help American workers if we do this or that? How do we get spending under control? And so he understands these negotiations. But I think in the end, what he really wants to talk about when you and I talk to him is what's the truth? What are the things? And baseline stuff is kind of an inside baseball congressional thing. And I'm sure that we can defer to those folks. But you're 100% right that the bottom line is that if you spend $1, you get to put the dollar in the baseline forever. But if you cut taxes by $1, then all of a sudden it's not in the baseline, and that's kind of like doesn't make any sense. What it does is it biases everything in favor of more spending.
Yes.
And so we're 100% aware of that. But in the end, you know, we have incredible friendship with Senator Crapo, and that what they decide to do with the baseline will depend on all sorts of things like what's the parliamentarian saying and so on. And in the end, what we care about in the White House is how it helps America's workers and what the truth is in the numbers, not what the CBO says our baseline should be.
So Kevin Hassett, as a former CEA chair and now the NEC director, give us a quick snapshot of the economy. Where is the economy today?
You know, the big thing is that, you know, and there are a lot of news on artificial intelligence today, that there's, you know, some pretty good tailwind from artificial intelligence increasing productivity. But at the same time, the reckless spending of the Biden administration has created something of a problem with inflation. You know, it's way above the Fed's target. And so I'm in a place where I see more stuff that we have to fix than stuff that I'm happy about.
And do you think, I mean, I've noticed, this is the last point. I know it's hard to figure right now. We're at the beginning of the process, not the end. But a number is circulating among House chairs and so forth, a target of $2 to $3 trillion of spending savings or reductions over the 10-year window. Yeah, you think those are good ballpark numbers? Should the markets think about the possibility of a $2 or $3 trillion spending savings over the next 10 years?
You know, one of the really fun things of the last week of such an honor to be able to serve my country again here, is to walk around and to see the Doge people, to see Elon Musk in the halls, and to see all the great ideas that people have to make sure that Americans are not seeing their money wasted by a wasteful government. And I think that, we don't have a number right now of what the overall target's going to be, but we've been stunned by the waste under the Biden administration. And so there's a heck of a lot for our team to fix. And I think we're very optimistic about our ability to rein in spending.
All right. Kevin Hassett, good luck. Congratulations.
Thanks, Larry.
Appreciate you coming on. Talk soon.